everyone, and welcome to Co-Blueprint. I'm Jeanette Mulvey, the Content Director of Co from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And today we are talking about cyber crime, which we all know is an especially big threat for small businesses. In this episode, we're going to tell you how and why hackers are targeting small businesses and the strategies you can use to protect yourself against them. Thank you so much for joining us today. We know this is a really challenging time for small businesses, and we created this entire Blueprint series to help you get through this time, rebuild your business safely, and come out on the other side better than ever. Before I introduce today's panel, just a few housekeeping notes. The first one is we'll be doing a couple of live polls today because we want to hear about you, our audience, and you can answer our first question at any time during the first half of the event. And that question is, how much of your work is being conducted online? Go ahead and do that now or whenever you're ready, and we will reveal those results later in the event. Secondly, we will be taking audience questions later. So throughout the event, if something occurs to you and you want to ask it as a question, you can type it into the right-hand screen, the panel on the right-hand side of your screen. And if you see someone else's question that you like, you can hit the thumbs up button to move it higher in the list. And before we get started, I want to thank our presenting sponsor, Chase for Business, as well as our supporting sponsors, AppGuard, FedEx, MetLife, Salesforce, and Square. So thanks to all of them for helping bring this to you today. So the first thing I want to do is introduce Maitland Muse, who is Executive Vice President, Global Channels and Strategic Alliances for AppGuard. He's going to talk to us today about cybersecurity. So welcome, Maitland. How are you?
I'm great, Jeanette. Thank you so much for having me today.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thank you. So you so set the stage for us, if you don't mind. How big is the cybersecurity threat to small businesses, and why are small businesses in particular such a target?
Well, I'll tell you, it is a major threat, obviously, to all businesses, small businesses in particular, primarily because many don't have the staff. This COVID crisis that we've been dealing with, clearly has had a major impact with so many businesses having to shift away from their standard operating procedures, moving so many people remote. It's had a really big impact in both the timing that it happened as well as the preparedness of the small businesses. And it's just been, they are very vulnerable. And unfortunately, malicious actors take full advantage of that. With some of the major attacks that you see out there, roughly 50% of cyber attacks are targeting small businesses just because, as I mentioned, they don't have the staff. It's a real challenge for them to keep up. And typically, as we know, cybersecurity has been more of that insurance policy, as as we've known in the past, that they get to it when they get to it, especially as a small business. And their concept has often been, it's not a matter of if I'll get attacked, it's more around when. And that's really where we sit today. They just were not prepared, not just small businesses, enterprises in general were not prepared for this shift in how we operate, and so many users going home and having to introduce so many new things into their networks. Just the time that I think it takes for hackers who are paid professionals working for others to get into systems and to ultimately identify ways to hold hostage small businesses' systems, whether it's their files, payroll, personal information of their consumers. Just so many different things that a small business owner is really just extremely vulnerable because they haven't had the time.
So it's interesting that you make the point that they are professionals working for other people, because I think the implication of that is these are people who spend all day long focusing on how to access, your data. So, and also I just want to say, you said small businesses are particularly vulnerable because they are the ones that these hackers know don't have the security in place. And I think that's important to remember, that if you're a small business thinking, well, I don't have a lot of money, or why would they come after me? It's the vulnerability is a big issue. So tell us a little bit about what are the most common types of hacking attempts against small businesses in particular? Like, what do they really look like?
So typically, it'll look like an invoice. It'll look like an email from a friend, a colleague. It'll look like something that you're very much used to, that we call phishing attacks, where something is sent hidden behind an application or something that we're very used to using, but we're not prepared to look for the detail that tells me an invoice, say, from my accounts payable team, which may be very small, and asking me to pay an authorized payment, for example. I don't realize that there was something very small inside that email that obviously differentiated from, something being authentic versus something a malicious actor would use. Simple things like that that just forced me or one of my employees to make an error. Oftentimes, the tools that I put in place are probably the bare minimum basics that often, either come with the system, or maybe I believed in what I read around the hype, but didn't do my full investigation as to what I am protected against with some of these tools. And it's just very easy for them to get through. And with that one click, if my employees aren't trained correctly, if I'm not trained correctly, if I click something that looks right because it's from a friend or a colleague that I know and I speak to and communicate often, that one click can put me out of business, especially if they get through and hold hostage my systems. And then I'm unfortunately forced to pay, or let's say I'm not going to pay. Now they hold hostage access to my systems and my business is shut down. Small businesses can't afford to be shut down for a minute, let alone a day. As we know from the previous stat, more than 60% of the small businesses go out of business as a result of some cyber attacks.
Say 60%, is that what you said?
60% of small businesses basically after a cyber attack are forced out of business.
I mean, that's huge.
Terrible.
Let's talk. I just want to make sure that people understand, like, what is actually happening. So if you get a phishing scam and it has a link in it that you shouldn't be clicking on, but you click on it, what is actually happening there?
So it's a variety of things that can occur. Let's say it's a Word document, for example, that's sent, or let me better use the invoice as the example that comes from the president of the company that's just advising payment. So I'll click on that invoice. The invoice may then go out to a website, which I assume is okay. But once it goes out to the website, it then pulls back that bad file, which tries to get into my system and take over our operating system. Those two key steps are you have now hit that point that you've let a bad file into your system that's trying to take over, basically, and activate within your operating system. Um, that at that point, you are now in big trouble as a small business owner if you don't have protective tools in place to one, avoid the operating process that is trying to happen that the malicious actor has set out. Or two, if you just don't have the protections inside, again, as we talk about defense in layers, for example, that will protect against the multiple aspects that a malicious actors try to, based on the very high number of new files being launched into the wild, what we call 0-day or unknown files. Not to get into the technical details, but to the point you made earlier, professionals are being paid to develop new tips and tricks to get into our system. That is their job, and they take it very seriously. It's a high reward for them. So they're just figuring out how to get behind something that you commonly use, something you commonly do, and just to make that click that again causes reactions behind the scenes, which you don't know, with the exception of the blue screen of death, the ransom notice that tells you, please pay in Bitcoin or something like that, at which point now release your files, and now you're in a very precarious situation.
Yeah. How long does it usually take? Do you know right away? If I know there's a lot of different scenarios, but do people usually know right away that things have gone wrong, or is it when they go to take money out of the bank and a check bounces?
it could be a couple of things. That's a really great question, Jeanette. In some cases, it could be almost instantaneous with that second or third click that comes in which you'll see something on the screen that begins demanding a ransom. On the other hand, oftentimes they're trying to lay something into your system that they can come back at another time to wake it up. In essence, almost like a spy, where they sit and lay dormant in your system. In many cases, they found the files are sitting dormant in certain enterprise systems for more than a year. And then they just spawn to life at a particular point when either defenses are lowered or just when, again, they see the right time, potentially, if there's a merger and acquisition, someone's getting special funding, anything that they can hold to their advantage, they being that malicious actor again, can hold to their advantage. So it could be anything from almost instantaneous to a year down the line and anything in between, really based on, again, you taking the unfortunate action of trusting something. And I think that's what it really boils down to.
Yeah.
Trusting stuff
Okay.
that you ordinarily wouldn't have.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think we've convinced everyone that this is a major problem, and probably they wouldn't even be here today if they didn't know that. So let's talk about what people can do. We all know we have to change our passwords. So we got that covered.
Very important.
What else can people do to protect themselves?
So there's a few different things. I think, most importantly, and I'll say this for all small business owners just in general, they've got to take the time, right? Right. That's what's most important. They've got to take the time, to look at their existing security posture, make sure their employees understand the threats that are out there, work with their employees team, and actually build a strategy to heighten their awareness of the threats that exist. Work with a security company, a security consultant, and it doesn't, those consults, they are not, while they will take some time, they don't have to cost a lot of money if you think about the potential cost and impact to your business of not having these things in place. Then you have to really focus on, making sure you have the proper, what we call cyber hygiene. To your point, changing passwords frequently, adding in things like multi-factor authentication, so that there are multiple ways to authenticate. I am the user. I'm supposed to get access into the system, and it can only do the things that I'm supposed to based on, the administrator, so that I can get home-free, open files. And from the employee base, make sure they're changing their passwords frequently. It's really important, and not using password 1234. Now it's password 12345. It's important for them to try to get creative. Most importantly, I think here, beyond just some of the things I mentioned, is focus on preventing breaches, not just what we call detecting and reacting to them. And that's, I think, one of the biggest challenges, is that many of the approaches today are all focused around detect and respond. Well, detect means something has happened. So now I've got to go into mitigation mode, where I've got to cover up the damage. I've got to stop the damage, stop the bleeding, and then hopefully it didn't hurt my business too bad. AppGuard, as we're here, is all about preventing. We want companies to focus on preventing damage from occurring, preventing the malicious action, and guarding your system from any of those bad things. That's probably the biggest difference when you go to a doctor that gives you something that can prevent a sickness, versus taking medicine once you're sick. Our goal is to help prevent you from getting sick.
Yeah. So one of the things that we often don't talk about is you can have all the systems in place, you can have the best technology, you can have the best security partners, but if your employees are not on board and educated, then they are really your first line of defense. So can you talk a little bit about educating your employees?
Yeah, absolutely, and you're right. So again, a key part of that is making it a routine practice, regardless of the size of your business. You've got to take security's got to be a priority, which means you've got to constantly work with them on educating, on some of the very simple things that are necessary in running, your business and having access into your system. Then you also need to test that. You need to test that by sending tricks at them to see if they actually click on an email that they shouldn't, and then working with them very quickly, of course, to ensure here's why you shouldn't have. Show them the different things, or work with them so that they understand the different things that allow them, or force them to make the click. It's just got to be a very heightened sense of awareness and constant communication with your employees. Again, big or small, have to take the time with them to explain the threats, the potential impacts, obviously the potential impact to their job itself, but you've got to work with them constantly to also evolve yourselves and your own hygiene. Because as much as you're teaching and as much as we're implementing solutions to protect against, the malicious and bad guys are working twice as hard to overcome the things we've just implemented. So it's a constant evolution. It's never, here's the 5 sets and rules that we only follow and they never change. They will constantly evolve, constantly have to refresh and just stay on top of it. But it comes back to spending that time.
Great. Thank you so much. We are going to now introduce our small business owners, and we will come back to Maitland later when we do our Q&A.
Great. Thank you.
So thank you, Maitland. So I'd like to welcome Marni Pastor, who is COO of Flexable, and she is from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and Joanne Sanders, president of EWISE. which is a communication, EWISE Communications, which is a firm in Atlanta. So welcome to both of you, Marni and Joanne. How are you?
Good.
Great. Thanks for having us, Jeanette.
Sure. Yeah. I'm going to start with Marni. So first, Marni, tell us about your business, what it does, and then how you've had to adapt during COVID and why that's made security a much bigger issue for you than it was before.
Sure. So Flexable is virtual childcare for working parents. And we actually partner with companies to offer our services to employees as an employee benefit. And so what that means is literally anytime a parent needs childcare or an engaging activity for their kid, they can come online, they can sign up for one of our activities, and we are there with their child, engaging with them one-on-one or in small groups for up to an hour. And Flexible's been around for the last 4 years, but that on-demand childcare and engagement that we've done, we used to do it in person. And we primarily would go to events, conferences, or to the work site and have physical caregivers with kids. And COVID changed all of that. And when events stopped in person, people stopped coming into work, we looked around and we said, we still believe that this mission is quite important. There have been, I don't know how many articles about what's happening for working families. My kids are just right outside the store, for example, with me. And we thought about how can we help parents now where they are, which is working from home. And so we shifted online, and shifting online meant we had to start to think about information security and cybersecurity.
So tell us a little bit, you know what, I'll come back to you and we can talk more about that. I'm going to go to Joanne. So Joanne, tell us the same thing. Tell us about your business, and you have already been the victim of our cyber attack. So tell us about what your business does and what happened.
So I'm president of EWISE Communications, which is a marketing agency in Atlanta, Georgia. And so we, of course, marketing has been digital, for the last couple of years. I mean, we get more and more digital, and obviously with COVID, we got even more of that. And as we were implementing all of these new systems, clearly we were just becoming more vulnerable to cyber attacks. And what happened with us is that we absolutely were a victim of a spoofing and phishing incident. But what actually happened with us is that we experienced a series of things that basically compounded one after the other that really made us stop and say, okay, we've got to stop the action. We've got to take a look at what's going on with our company, because as a marketing company, I wanted to make sure that we had a good, brand perspective out there. And we were running into, we had malware and virus attacks and issues. We had, our clients were not receiving our emails because our servers were flagged. Our website was flagged by Google because of all the things that were happening to us. We had spoofing, we had phishing emails, and so we just had a series of things happen to us. And so we, again, kind of had a meeting, agreed that this is a team effort, and started, putting processes in place to fix all this.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to go back to Marni. Tell us, before you tell us what kind of changes you put in place, just tell us a little bit why moving to virtual childcare has made the cybersecurity issue so much more important for you.
Yeah, great question, Jeanette. Childcare is all about trust. When we were in person, it was all about trust. What makes a parent comfortable leaving their child at any time in someone else's care? They have to trust in that individual and that it's going to be a safe experience for their child. So trust is huge. And there's a couple different ways that we had to be thinking about earning that trust, right? Both directly with parents. The services we provide have to be safe. They have to be comfortable leaving their child with us in front of a screen and knowing that nothing bad is going to happen while they're there. We also work directly with companies, and those companies provide us with access to information about their employees. And they need to know that we're trustworthy with that information. And then it's not vulnerable, like Maitland said, to anyone getting in there and getting that information that is so valuable and important to those companies.
Yeah. So what have you done? What kind of changes have you made?
Yeah. we have, put into place a web app tool, and we use Google Cloud for that web app. So what we were trying to do is put together a tool that utilized one of the big guys out there that does invest heavily in this space, because we can't do it all on our own as a small business, but has features that come standard in their packages, like end-to-end encryption, so that if that employee information is in our systems, we're doing our part to keep it safe. We're also, really invested, and we've talked a lot about training. We're really invested in weaving in security and trust to all of our processes when it comes to our caregiving. So who we hire, how we train and onboard them right when they start with us, and then what protocols we use every time they're going to sign on to a screen with a child, to make sure that we're taking advantage of any security feature out there to signify we're safe, your child will have a safe experience. Waiting rooms, using a tool like Zoom, where now at this point most parents recognize it, they know what it is. They also know what security features are available, so making sure we are using those security features every single time that somebody logs on.
Right. Thank you. Joanne, tell us, you have also made some pretty significant changes. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the way that we did it, we actually, we had to kind of take a step back and really talk through everything. And what we did is we created buckets of, categories of things that were impacting us, that were creating that vulnerability. So we had, we identified all the systems that were where we had vulnerabilities. We then identified inconsistencies with our employees, because our employees were creating vulnerabilities. And then certainly the knowledge gap that we were talking about, that Maitland even mentioned earlier, we also kind of identified that, because everybody had different understanding of what spoofing was versus phishing emails and so forth. And so there was definitely education necessary there. So once we kind of created those three buckets, then from a systems perspective, we started taking action. We certainly made sure that we were maxed out on all the systems, because all the systems, they have a lot of cybersecurity tools, and we were trying to take advantage of those. But we also took some more drastic steps. For example, one of the things that a lot of small business owners have is, they have their website on a shared server. So like a GoDaddy or a Bluehost or something like that. You set up your website, you set up your email, and you're on a shared server, and you're there with other companies, and you're hoping that you've got good neighbors. That's not always the case. And that was our situation. And so we were on a shared server with other people that were not doing the right thing. And so they were getting into our system through that, as well as our email. And so we had to kind of pull out of that and implement different systems. Inconsistencies with our employees. We had different types of antiviral software on different computers. We had different scanning processes on different computers, and simply harmonizing that actually was a big improvement for us. And then we do have kind of a systematic way of making sure that our employees are knowledgeable. So, I mean, that's just a quick example of some of the things that we implemented. But a lot of small moves made a huge difference.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point, is that it seems so overwhelming, right? But if you take small steps, Marni, you're working for a company that's technically a small business, and of course everyone is strapped right now. You talked a little bit about choosing partners to partner with. Can you talk more about that? How do you decide who to partner with?
Yeah. And Joanne, like you, I feel overwhelmed. This isn't naturally a space where I have a lot of expertise. And I see these names and I'm trying to understand, and they're concepts I don't really know much about. So, with respect to selecting partners, one place we wanted to start was, again, this is about trust and credibility. So are there credible names out there that we can go to and we can utilize? So I mentioned that as a business, we're on Google Suite for, our internal team, and, things like documents and email. That comes with free security features like setting up dual factor authentication in your email. So I started by saying, like, what are some of the names that people out there know? So we can kind of say, hey, here's who we're partnered with. You trust these people too. We trust our data with them. You trust your data with them. Hopefully that helps for us to establish that credibility with the companies that are going to want to partner with Flexable. And then, I really started doing a little bit of Google searching, looking at what companies do have small and medium business plans, right? A lot of the services are software as a service types of services. And luckily today, there are a lot that set up SMB types of plans where, it might not have all the bells and whistles, but it'll have a set of the most important things and be a little bit more reasonable cost-wise.
Yeah, thank you. Joanne, let's talk a little bit more about your employees. You mentioned you had computers running different antivirus software. How have you gone about informing and training your employees to deal with these issues?
So one of the good things that we did, because the start of all this was us sitting down and asking ourselves, what the heck is going on here? So, and I say that because from the onset, and not even deliberately, but just as a team, we're just all trying to make sure that we're solving problems and doing the right thing. We ended up sitting down together and talking about our experience. And so as we did that, we continued to do that. And so when we identified, okay, this category of things were creating issues, we as a team brainstormed on how, what we needed to do. And some people were researching in different areas, and then everyone was sharing that information throughout this journey. And that ended up educating everybody. Again, different people had different levels of experience on or knowledge on different aspects. And so that process, moving through solving cybersecurity problems on systems, solving cybersecurities on inconsistent behavior on computers and so forth, that was incredible, like a master's class that the employees got. But then from a ongoing perspective, we don't really do it that formally. We go to lunch. And every 2 weeks or 3 weeks, we go to lunch as a team, and we talk about, we kind of do a check-in, say, hey, how's email going? Are you guys still getting a lot of, questionable emails and so forth? We've actually flagged the invoice emails. Maitland, I'm so glad you mentioned that one. We talk about that, and we talk about, what these emails look questionable, et cetera, et cetera. It's also, I think, a combination of COVID and that situation itself has actually promoted us to use our collaboration tools to verify that much more. And so we're all in a group chat and say, hey guys, did you get this email? Does this look right? And we talk about what emails are suspicious and what emails don't need to be opened. We make sure that everyone has extended preview within Outlook, which is what we use, to make sure they can see the email without opening it. And if it's not clearly stated what this email is for and who it's from, people don't open it. And if it's an invoice, like I mentioned, people will be calling asking for their money. So you don't need to worry about opening up that email if it's not, if it's questionable. And again, we kind of double back and check with each other using collaboration tools. So I think between just the exercise of running the team through the process and then just having those kind of regular check-ins, whether it's virtual through collaboration tools or to lunch when we get together, it's really just educated everyone, and it's really, it's taken care of like 70 or 80% of our issues. It's been amazing.
That's great. Joanne, tell us, you mentioned your, Marni. Going back to Marni. We talked about your customers before, and of course they have expectations from you, to be making sure their children are secure. Talk a little bit more about like how your customers are driving your security efforts and just about trust in general in relation to this.
Yeah, so like I said, and Joanne, you said the same thing. I feel like I'm getting a master class in security just by doing my job every day. I've learned so much from our customers. We are fortunate that the companies that are, investing in parents, investing in childcare benefits, they tend to be larger companies, usually with 1,000 employees or more, sometimes smaller, but pretty large. And in those types of companies, a lot of times they have a robust IT team and a security team, and they have InnoSec processes. And so I have gotten lengthy questionnaires through the sales process asking us all about information security within the company. And that has been an amazing opportunity for me to audit and to understand what is best practice, what does this look like, what are people who do this well demanding of their partners, and to start to get the sense for where are we in that journey. And it's truly shaped my roadmap when I start to see things over and over again as coming up as important, and maybe they're not things that we've quite addressed in the way we should yet. That helps me prioritize what the next most important thing is and where to start focusing if we have limited spend on the budget that we have and deploying that budget to be safer.
Yeah, that's a great point. Joanne, I'm coming back to you with the last question, and then we're going to reveal our audience poll results.
Yeah.
I know that you, as a result of this experience, have developed this security checklist. Do you want to just walk us through in a couple of your key points?
Yeah, I've definitely shared my experience with a lot of different people because this didn't happen over like a month period, right? This was through an extended time. So I've shared this with others, and a couple of things. First of all, talk to your team. So the first thing on the checklist is talk to your team, because in order for you to understand the full scope of what's going on, you need them engaged. For example, some people on my team were getting those spoof emails. Other people on my team were getting cyber attacked in other ways. So unless we're all talking and we're all understanding that, we don't understand the full scope of what we need to solve. Second of all, email and websites, both yours and websites that you go to, are like the main, are like a key way for viruses and for problems to happen. So making sure that you have protection on those two elements will help a lot. It's not the only thing that you need to do, but it will help tremendously. Again, kind of harmonize your security across your team. Because of this presentation, I actually looked up how much I ended up spending versus savings. And it really is not that much to make sure that everyone has the same software system, everyone has the same kind of level of protection. It's such a simple thing to do, and people overlook it all the time. I will say this, adding payment layers is important. Cybersecurity, I mean, a lot of it is about they want your money, right? That's kind of what motivates them. So it's important to make sure that you add payment layers to your process so that invoices have to be almost approved twice. And this has been a painful process for my team, but it has saved us from a lot of different problems. And now everybody has adapted, and now everybody's used to it. The other thing I'll say to that is that corporate credit cards, make sure that you have a credit card that protects from fraud charges. And there's ways of incorporating that, and there's different credit cards that will offer that. In case you end up spending the money and it's a fraudulent thing, sometimes you can recuperate some of that money back. Obviously, password policy, I know we've all talked about it. We have a quarterly password policy. We have our own passwords, and then we carry our customers' passwords as well, because we do communications on their behalf. So we make sure that we have a password policy, that protects them as well as us. And then the last thing I will say is share your cybersecurity process and focus with your clients. It is a brand differentiator. It is really important to share that with your customers because they feel more comfortable working with you. They feel like, okay, I can trust these individuals with my information, just like Marni. Share that, because I was just focused on solving problems as opposed to really sharing that with others. And my clients love the fact that we have cybersecurity systems in place. And that's it. As a small business, it's so important to differentiate yourself and find every way to do so. So that's, the last item on my list.
Great. Thank you. That was super useful. So thank you both, Marni and Joanne. We'll come back to you during the audience Q&A. Before we do that, though, I want to reveal some of our poll results. So let's see where we are with how much of your work is conducted online. So we can see that our audience is pretty evenly split, but everybody's doing some of their work online, of course, which we knew. So, I mean, really everyone is at risk here. And I would imagine that among the people that are doing their work online, that much of it is their financial work. So I think that's especially important. And also, you know, their private data for their employees and their customers. Let's do another poll live right now. This one is, how would you describe your cybersecurity strategy? So let's just see how the audience is describing their own cybersecurity strategy. Hopefully they have one, although I know lots of small businesses don't. Let's see. So a lot of people here are really starting to think about it for the first time, as many as 50%. So I think that's a pretty significant portion. And I think that one of the key things to remember is that even these people who have what they're calling a long established cyber strategy, to Maitland's point, is that it's constantly changing. So it's not a thing like a set it and forget it kind of thing. They constantly are going to have to be updating and strengthening, as is indicated here. So thank you to everybody in the audience who voted on that. So we are going to go to the audience Q&A. Maitland, I'm going to come to you first.
Sure.
So this person says, what steps should a business take to address a business email compromise? So maybe you could just tell us what that is. And, you know, when, I guess, how likely are they to recover money if they act quickly in the first 48 hours?
Yeah, that's not probably not very likely to recover their money once they've decided and agreed to pay it. I think the bigger issue is, do they really trust that the adversary is not going to come back again at another time? Once you've paid a malicious actor, you've kind of let your guard down. So it's highly unlikely that you'll get that back. The other thing that, of course, to worry about really is, you know, since you've paid once, typically they're going to try to come back to you another time. So your immediate focus has to be is to put new protections in by understanding how, you know, what was the mistake that was made, how did they get in, where was that vulnerability, and close that gap immediately. So one of the things that most every standard will tell you is, as difficult as it may be, is you don't pay the ransom. If you're put in that position, first and foremost, if you're going to be held hostage by email in that sense. But if you have to pay the ransom, of course, you have to immediately put protections in to guard it from happening again, because there's a high chance that they will be coming back after you very, very quickly.
When you do pay a ransom, do they generally release your files?
Yes, they will, and it's a matter of how long. Again, will they release that? Because oftentimes they say we'll release it and give you back the source code, but that's not always the case. And in fact, I think going back to I loved hearing this several times today. It's all about the trust. So you can't trust what actions they're going to take afterwards. You've got to very quickly attack and put protections in place to guard your perimeter so that they can't get in again. But don't expect, that they're not going to come back. So again, protect yourself, put in a preventative measure to close up whatever vulnerabilities that exist. And we can certainly talk about those, what some of those steps are. I saw some of the other questions that, kind of lean towards that. But I would not count on them giving you back everything. I do believe that, of course, once you pay a ransom, of course, they will release the files that they have held on to.
Yeah. Joanne, I'm going to come to you with this question, but tell me if it's not a good question for you. This person says, when your team is not on a central server, like, how would a bad file get into the system? So I'm asking you because you guys switched from a shared server, but I know you were sharing it with other companies. Right. So I'm not sure if you can answer that question or not.
So ask it again. I'm sorry.
I think they're saying if your team is working and not sharing a server, then can ransomware or a bad file go from one person to another if they're not working on a central server?
Well, I mean, I think they're communicating somehow, and I mean,
right.
Then so if they're communicating through collaboration systems, that's a whole other discussion. But usually what ends up happening is, even if it's a Gmail that's then coming across or what have you, there's usually an email exchange. And so if I have a bad email and I send you an email, whether you're on my server or not, you're going to potentially get infected. And I don't know that I'm sending that over to you. So that's how it happens. And I will say this, most of this happens innocently. And so we have to all, it's kind of like wearing masks type of thing, like we have to all be conscientious of things in order to protect one another through this process and to be able to work successfully together.
Yeah, thank you. Maitland, I'm going to come back to you. Do you have an answer to that question?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, so you absolutely can send that file unknowingly to someone else. So, beyond, there's a couple of steps that you can take, whether you're on a shared server or a private server. If you have a private server for your infrastructures, you put protection on the server, and you also protect the endpoints. In addition to that, once your files or as your emails are guarded and the applications, of course, are guarded, you will then prevent any processes from occurring inside the system. And ultimately, an antivirus type of product will remove or should remove that file once they get updated. That's probably one of the biggest challenges, are today's antiviruses are not able to keep up with the high volume of malware that's being launched into the wild. So you need to protect your server. More importantly, you need to also protect all of the individual workstations or laptops and desktops that your employees have. So you've got 2 levels of protection in place, in addition to some of the other tools that we've mentioned today around password protection, et cetera. But you can absolutely pass that to someone else if the source is not ultimately removed.
Yes.
Yeah. Marni, I imagine that you guys are in this situation, but correct me if I'm wrong. They're talking about people working remotely and the vulnerability of Wi-Fi access for your remote workers. And also, I would imagine in your case, for your clients, the kids who are coming in, because now you've got a bunch of people using Wi-Fi to access each other that isn't necessarily secure. So how are you guys dealing with that in terms of your employees?
Yeah. I mean, we're, again, like in trying to choose tools where we believe that provider is taking some steps that while you're using that tool, it's as safe as it can be. And I know Zoom is like not perfect, but when we're actually engaging with kids and in customers, like having that interaction be limited to those tools where there are some protections in place, that's one way we're trying to just be in a remote environment and being in a distributed environment, but trying to kind of keep the most precious spaces as safe as we possibly can. And we're not as far, Joanne, I think, as you are in our journey, but looking at things that you can do, like just setting some specs for people at home, like what bandwidth do you need? How do you make sure that like you're doing things that you can do in your own home? Do you have endpoints, security in place on your own laptop and machine, making sure that everybody in our organization does have basic things, and investing in giving them the specifications for those things and paying for some of those things are other ways that we're trying to work towards being even better.
Actually, that's really good advice. Joanne, this person talks about where does an incident response plan fit? And I feel like this is something of all of us that have talked, I feel like you've really put a system in place for having a response. But we've talked about preparing as opposed to, I'm wondering if you guys also have a plan that you use in case something happens. Like, do you have a multi-step plan for reacting to a problem?
So we do. Generally speaking, we have kind of a checklist of different things that we're looking at. So, and it depends on the incident, because this experience has allowed us to become very familiar with what's available from a contingency perspective through all the systems that we have. So if we have an email situation, we can, we use Microsoft 365. So there are steps that we can take with that group. And through this exercise, we've identified that and said, okay, so here's the steps that we can take here. If we have a situation where a person has, ended up spending money, then on, and like I said, like the spoofing, that's really one of the things that really hit us hard. Then there's steps that we can take there from a prevention, but if there's no way to prevent it, then how do we help compensate the situation? So when we isolated the systems versus what the employees were doing versus knowledge gap, then that kind of naturally created okay, in case this happens again, this is how we're going to handle it. And that's basically what we have. I think coming into the next year, we're actually looking to bring a cybersecurity person to take things to the next level for us. But we were just basically trying to just kind of contain and wrap our arms around what we had and what we could do. And it's been working great.
Great, thank you. Maitland, I'm actually going to ask you 2 questions in a row. So I kind of wish I had asked you this one at the beginning, which this person just says, what is ransomware and how can you protect yourself? So first, can you just give a brief summary of what ransomware is? Clarify that.
Sure, ransomware is a form of malware in which adversaries use different tactics to get into your system and hold hostage, in essence, either your files, IP protection, some segment within your operating system that houses very important information either to your business or potentially your customer information, social security numbers, bank accounts. So they basically hold all of these files hostage. They encrypt access to it, basically take over your system and prevent you from being able to do anything at that particular point. So it is a very tough thing to overcome if you don't have the appropriate protections to avoid it from occurring.
Yeah. Okay. So with that in mind, our most popular question so far is small businesses do not have big budgets for security measures. So what are some low cost, high reward options that businesses can use?
So was that question is to me, I take it? Yeah. Okay. So one, and I'll just say AppGuard's an exceptionally great, inexpensive approach to probably the most advanced cybersecurity protection out there by bringing forth prevention, right? So we can absolutely become a cost-effective solution to help you optimize what you have in place. There's a variety of other tools that you could use. There are several free tools that we work extremely well with in advising you on how to what we call optimize a cybersecurity solution using a free tool in AppGuard. But it doesn't have to be super expensive. What it has to be is super effective in making sure that, again, you're preventing things from occurring as opposed to waiting for an action that you then respond to. That's ransomware. That's other malware. So it's focused around preventing bad things from happening and really guarding your systems. I think as everyone has shared today, it's taking the actions, heightening the awareness, but also reinforcing this along the way to test what you've talked about and what you've implemented. Does it work? Can I trick my employees? Have they changed their passwords? Can I send an invoice to see if someone will click and accept those things? It's got to be constant reinforcement. Those things don't take a lot of money, but they do take a little bit of time.
Right. Okay, thank you. So Marni, someone is asking about cyber insurance, which actually is always a popular question when we talk about this topic. Can you talk a little bit about that? Do you guys have it?
Yeah, so we recently did purchase cyber coverage. We also have general liability as well. And again, I mentioned that our customers have been a wealth of information, but our potential customers were asking, is this something that you do carry? Because we really want to see that a partner has cyber insurance. Mm-hmm. And we did take that step. I think many people on today's webinar have said they're going to, attackers are after your money or, after your information that they could then use and monetize elsewhere, right? So our customers too want to know if anything did happen, will they be able to recover any money or will they be able to get money back for any of the investments they have to make in mitigating? And so having cyber coverage is, again, a way to show, A, we're being proactive and hopefully you can trust us. But B, in the event that something bad did happen, we can kind of recoup through our insurance, some of the money that might go down the wayside that we have to spend to mitigate.
Right. Thank you. Joanne, so I'm going to ask you first if you also have any thoughts on cyber insurance. And then this person also wants to know just what are the risks if a business tries to do this themselves?
Well, actually, let me answer that latter question first. So one of the things that we experience, so as a marketing agency, we deal with a lot of product information. We're under non-disclosure agreements. Sometimes we work with companies that are highly regulated, and there's different kind of communication regulations too. So one of the things that it's triggered is, for us, we have to make sure that our legal contracts are updated. And we've had to make sure that we have that in line and that we have protections in place to make sure that we are satisfying either regulation or making sure that we're holding the specific information for our clients, so that make sure that any kind of patent information, for example, that is shared with us with a product that we're rolling out is not captured in any way, any kind of NDAs. And so we've actually had to make sure that we have good document protection, but also we've updated our contracts to make sure that we kind of, push away some of the liability to us, because we are a small business. We can't figure it all out. So, and our clients know that has to be a partnership to making sure that this information stays safe.
Great, thank you. Maitland, I'm going to come to you for a couple questions. One is, do you want to weigh in on the cyber insurance thing?
Yeah, actually, just a couple of things, and we certainly see a huge increase in cyber insurance and its availability. But there's a couple of key points. Depending on the insurance policy itself, what it covers for, what it covers against, what protections it gives you. So it's really important to understand the fine print of that, not just that, they'll pay you in the event that, there was a breach that occurred to your business, how it protects, any information. So you've got to really pay close attention to that. The other thing, oftentimes, and what we're working with in several instances, is we become a part of that policy. So you can get the cyber insurance, but it's very important that what protects the company in that event. And in many cases, there is a package that comes. So in order to actually be fully effective with your cyber insurance, you have to have this, and that tool. We are one of those tools that then give you that extra level of protection, but also guards the insurance company too, because as we all know, insurance is important, but there's a very high expectation that no one is going to get breached at the end. So what are the components within the cyber insurance are really very important to understand before you sign anything.
Great. Also, I want to ask you this question because my husband talks about this all the time. So now I can tell, someone asked this question, but I can tell him that I asked you this, which is, does any of these people ever get caught and punished? Because it's infuriating.
Yeah, they do. I mean, it's just as many bad guys that are out there practicing. We have, several intelligence agencies. Everyone's constantly checking forensics to figure out, where the breach occurred, what the point was, and then ultimately try to get to those bad actors wherever they are in the world. Oftentimes, they are in some of the far-reaching places throughout Europe. So yeah, they are. It's not often that they're caught, and just in terms of the mass numbers, but absolutely, we're constantly trying to find, not we, AppGuard, but they're constantly working towards, who are the bad guys, what are they doing, and then ultimately why, who's behind them, who's paying them. So it's a constant and an ongoing investigation.
Great. So I'm going to have just a couple of minutes left. I'm going to do a lightning round. Marni, I'm coming to you first. What if you knowing what you know now, if you were a small business who didn't have a lot of time and didn't have a lot of money and could only do one thing this week to protect themselves, what would that one thing be, knowing what you know now?
Yeah, I think similar to what Joanne shared, investing in your employees and training and talking about these things. It doesn't cost anything. And having that dialogue and that line of communication, making people aware of basic things like spoofing and phishing. Joanne said it just lowered, their risk by, 70, 80%, and that's for free. So taking that step first is a great place to start.
Great. Joanne, question, knowing what you know now, what's the one thing a small business should do today?
Yes, I mean, I agree with Marni, but take a look at everything that you have and max out your cybersecurity features on everything you have, on your email, on your websites, all of it. It won't get you all the way there, but it is often a free step that you can take, and it will help start this process.
Great. Maitland, I'm coming back to you, but I'm going to trick you and change the question a little bit.
I knew you wouldn't give me this layup, but okay.
That's right. What do you think is the simplest thing that small businesses most often overlook that they don't think about in terms of being a security breach?
I think it's a matter of trust. I think that's been a mistake that we often have made. We've trusted anyone that's come into our system. We've opened any email that's been shared with us. We've clicked on any file over the years, even though we've heard it constantly. So trust has been a big issue. I think for what would I do in that effect? It's better understand what zero trust means and what are the impacts of trusting absolutely no one, no thing that comes into my system. So I need to validate and authenticate, where it came from. That one simple step can be game changing. And then obviously the other thing is I'd implement the right tool. And just to be candid here, AppGuard's a phenomenal tool, to provide that level of security and protection against all malware, ransomware, and everything else that's out there. AppGuard guards your systems for that. That was the layup I was hoping you would give me.
Yep, and you did it anyway. Thank you so much, Maitland. I actually really appreciate your time, and it was really good information. Thank you to Marni and Joanne as well. I'd also like to thank our sponsors, our presenting sponsor, Chase for Business, as well as our supporting sponsors, AppGuard, FedEx, MetLife, Salesforce, and Square. And to our audience, of course, thank you so much for joining us today. We hope that you'll join us for our next Code Blueprint event, which is on Tuesday, December 15th, just to confuse you, at 2 p.m. And we will be discussing how you can deepen your relationships with customers using technology. So mark your calendars for that. And in the meantime, don't forget to check out the helpful links at the bottom of this page where you're watching now. Thank you all so much, and we will see you soon. Bye-bye.